People that work in the wedding industry, have you ever seen a couple and immediately thought this ends in divorce? Why? Photographing the groom and you see his eyes light up when a guest arrives. You look over and it's a cute woman in a short dress. He smiles, walks up to the woman, picks her up and swings her in his arms. Best smile I captured of the groom all day. Marriage didn't last 6 months from what I've heard. At a wedding when the I do's came, the groom said, "I guess." I'm a therapist and marriage counseling a lot of times is unfortunately divorce counseling. If your spouse talks about it, go. People wait way too long. When my husband and I got married we both agreed that no one gets a veto card on couples therapy. If one of us felt it was needed, we would go. Neither of us has asked yet, but it's nice to know that we have that fallback if we need it. 26 years. You never know. Was at a friend's wedding once. It was at the Justice of the Peace. When the judge or officiant came around to if anyone doesn't believe in the union to speak up or forever hold your peace. Loud UHO came shrieking from the back. It was my friend's 2-year-old son. Everybody was joking saying it was a sign. When the bride and groom argued over why the groom's mother shouldn't get all money given to them on their wedding day. Yeah, that was a red flag. One of my close friends asked everyone to give cash or gift cards instead of presents. Because they already had a house with everything they needed. At the reception, her dad stands up for his speech and offers the gifted money to the Buddhist temple where their family went. My friend was mortified. Her husband got super angry. But it was done. There must have been 200 plus people at that wedding. That temple got a huge donation. It was the 3rd time the bride had hired me and all the guys had been carbon copies. She clearly had a type. The type wasn't working. But she wasn't going to let that stop her. They had a big fight the night before the wedding and were considering calling it off. Until the bride showed up 30 minutes before the ceremony. No one was sure if she would be there at all. The groom danced with his mom more times than he did with the bride. The bride was snippy and nitpicky with the staff all night. The word annulment was cast around and I hope to God they went through with it the next day because holy. I don't work in the industry. Just have my own personal story. My boyfriend and I got invited to his female co-worker's wedding. We used to go dancing with her while she was engaged. Her boyfriend was stationed on the East Coast. Her fiancé registered sign didn't take kindly to a male co-worker showing up to the wedding that we were invited to. And I even went to her bridal shower, so the groom sent his dad to threaten my boyfriend into leaving because they work in the same industry. I have connections. You'll never work in again. Even though he was retired. Groom also refused to dance with the bride except for photos. And she loved to line dance so she was crushed. All of us who cared about the bride knew her groom was just a Thai guy. They lasted a year. A few times as a photographer. The couple were usually fine. The families themselves were too different and combative. This is why my husband and I eloped. We keep our families as separate as possible. His side isn't bad and my paternal aunts and uncles are cool. So they would probably be fine. But having my immediate family interact with his immediate family just makes me cringe. Think hardcore Republican versus suburban Democrats. I work and in a hotel. I came in one night to find the wedding was already wrapped up. It was supposed to go until 1 AM and it was 11 PM. Because the wedding couple had a fight and she went home with mom. At another one they had a huge rehearsal dinner fight which spilled out into the lobby. Everyone in the lobby found out that she hated his parents. She was pregnant and she had no idea who the father was. And a few other things. Half the guest list packed up and checked out the next day. They still got married. Heard from a friend who did calligraphy that a bride came to get wedding invites and the usual wording of bride mum and dad and groom mum and dad invite you to the wedding of bride and groom. Bride didn't want groom's parents' names on the invite. My mate did an invite mock-up called the couple for a check and the groom lost it. Because groom's parents were the ones paying for most of the wedding. They didn't need any invites. Wedding DJ here. Had a wedding a few years ago where the groom was a total dickhead. When it was his turn to make a speech, he refused to make one. When the bride's sister begged him to please make a speech or at least just tell the bride she looks beautiful, he got up, took the mic, mumbled to her that she looks beautiful and sat back down. When I left after the wedding was done, I was walking to my van with some gear and I saw the bride sitting one side crying. Found out a few days later that the groom hit her 3 days before the wedding and he tried to hit her at the wedding again when she asked him to not drink so much and pace himself. It's sad reading so many of these replies and realizing most of these couples probably weren't even friends to each other. Didn't expect so many responses. Thanks for sharing. I always love a good thread. Honestly though, some of these made me realize how lucky I am to have found my favorite person. How hope you all find yours soon, if you haven't already. I work for a catering company. I knew they were going to get a divorce as soon as the bride started grinding on the best man when the groom was puking his guts out in the corner. I worked fine dining catering for over 20 years, so I've worked lots of weddings and receptions. I once heard a bride at the reception during the toast say that she actually thought she was asking out the groom's twin brother on their first date and that might actually be cute, except she just kept going on how the twin was more compatible, etc. Then she ended the toast with, "Well, as nice as you are, you'll make a great first husband." I was walking past the cameraman at that time and you can hear me on tape saying, "Did you get that? Tell me you got that." I work in the industry, side hobby, and I saw it before entering. Recent husband came to me, a total stranger to him, and asked what I would do if I found my fiancée eyeing her dance partner 3 weeks before the wedding. I just shook my head and walked away. 2 months. Used to serve at a lot of weddings. At one very expensive engagement party, the groom got drunk and tried to pick a fight with one of the servers. He then punched another guest and had to be walked out. Bride seemed upset but not shocked. Many years ago I had a side hustle doing cakes and would often get orders for wedding cakes. Long story short, the bride-to-be threw a full-fledged stompy-footed tantrum, locking herself in my bathroom and refused to come out because the groom was unreasonably insisting on having a say in what the cake flavor was going to be. Like, say through the door, "Get out of my bathroom." And all I'd get was a whiny defiant little naru. She was about 22. I perform ceremonies as an officiant, and no other officiants. The worst, IMHO, are the weddings that are just a bad idea. The couple is young, inexperienced, and selfish. I mean, even courthouse weddings can last decades. But if you have a wedding that is clearly not planned out, they are often not thought out as well. Weddings that are rebellious as a "you daddy, I am 19 and marry who I want." I give about 2 years. Especially if the bride and groom are out of sync with one another. Or one just looks like this was the other's idea primarily. Oddly enough, weddings with cheesy themes, Star Wars, Elvis, etc. last longer than the traditional styles. I have theories on that, but don't have enough data that's not anecdotal to back it up. But I think casual weddings where everyone is relaxed, happy, and having a good time because the wedding is about celebrating rather than ceremony will last the longest. A sense of humor helps. If both the bride and groom are relaxed and silly with one another, those last the longest. Cheesy themes equals shared interests, hobbies? I thought this thread might have some fun stories. Turns out they're just sad. Catered weddings for a year or so. Here's some of the more bat ones off the top of my head. Entire wedding party dropped Molly about an hour into the wedding. Bride was colossally ed up while the groom looked like he himself while staring at the alpacas they hired to take pictures with. Yes, they hired alpacas. No, I don't know why. Close bracket. Bridezilla screamed at our serving team for serving too much chicken and not leaving enough for her, after she refused to eat until 3 hours past dinner service. Groom was nowhere to be found after that. Bride's mom tried to one of our chefs. A very good looking 6'3" Italian man. Bride had to pull her away from the kitchen 2 times, causing a fun argument between the bride's mom and dad. Bride started crying and the groom decided to disappear to go take a few shots instead of comforting his wife. Yes. One of my brides was nervous and got so drunk before the ceremony that she had to be helped down the aisle. Then when the ceremony was over, instead of kissing the groom, we now pronounce you man and wife, she licked him from chin to eyeball. She fell during the recessional and knocked over a waiter carrying champagne. She couldn't be in their post-ceremony photoshoot because she kept falling. When it was time to cut the cake, we couldn't find her. Our staff went to her hotel room and found her covered in her own vomit, still in her wedding dress. She had the audacity to ask for a refund after all of this. They're divorced now. Edited to note. This was a symbolic ceremony and they were legally married beforehand. Overall the situation was quite sad. Night before the wedding. The bride-to-be tried to sleep with me on her stag night, crying on my shoulder she wasn't ready for marriage. Even my 18-year-old hormonal brain did a big nope there. They lasted a year. Long time ago worked as a wedding planner caterer, depended on the client. Woman calls on Monday morning. Her fiancé registered sign had proposed the day before, Sunday, and she wanted to get married that Saturday. I work catering gigs in Florida. The bride was being super mean towards the groom during dinner and the reception. Like a sarcastic "you should have known to do that already" dumbass tone. Our crew figured, yep, this is a short marriage. After the obligatory dances and dinner had started, the groom came up, tipped the DJ, the photographers, then came over, tipped our crew way too much, thanked us very sweetly, and said he was gonna skip away and drive down to the beach a few minutes away while the party continued. He never came back. Next day we were told by the bride's family the sheriff found his car, the groom's body, and a gun down by the beach. God, that got dark quick. I ran a fairly upmarket hotel and restaurant that sometimes hosted weddings. Made a rookie error and booked in a wedding for Christmas Eve. This should have been a warning sign, as it shows a pretty significant lack of consideration for friends and family, making them travel across the country on one of the most irritating days of the year, when we'd all rather be at home with family preparing for the next day. They turned up 3 hours early and the battle axe of a bride proceeded to shout at us for not being prepared. Surrounded by her incredibly embarrassed but not unsurprised family. There were various other red flags throughout the night, but the main one was when the husband got blind drunk on whiskey and asked me to go to his hotel room with him and break him in as a married man. I politely refused. My background is in marriage and family therapy and I work at a wedding venue now. There have been many times that I thought a couple is destined for future therapy, if not divorce. Especially when I see the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse as described by Gottman: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, or stonewalling. I also assume that things won't end well when either of the bride or groom is a big bully towards me or the other vendor, so it just makes me feel bad for the future spouse. But we don't tend to hear much from the couples once they are married, so I usually won't know how things end up down the road. I worked in a tux shop for a while after high school. The friction in a couple's relationship was directly correlated with how involved the mothers were. Whether it was Mothzilla of the bride or a mama's boy groom. If they had their finger on the scale, you could see it. I remember a wedding that I worked catering for that involved the groom getting rather handsy with the maid of honor during the reception. Both were drunk and a bit too close. The bride was on the dance floor flopping around drunk off her ass to a point of having to be escorted to a restroom to freshen up. Honestly, it always seems when the bridegroom get trashed during the reception, something happens that will cause them to split shortly after. Not always, but it's just something I noticed during the weddings I have assisted with. I had a buddy who put himself through grad school playing violin at weddings. He said there were several that everybody knew it was the wrong choice, He said you could just see it in their eyes and how they walked. If there's a walk of shame, then surely there's a march of despair. Oh yeah. Definitely. Ceremony is coming up. But the groom is nowhere to be found. Everyone is looking for him. We look in the groom's lounge, hangout room where the groom and groomsmen hang out. They hears banging the maid of honor. Shame. 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 I used to work at a popular wedding venue. Bride and groom came in the day before for rehearsal. Checked the decorations. And played a sweet video of the couple. Standard wedding bull. Next day. Bride and groom arrived fighting the entire time until reception, where the groom proceeded to drink himself blind before speeches and had to be carried out. Didn't even get to play that video. It was the best shift ever. Got to go home early and take home a bunch of food already paid for. Worked wedding receptions. Here are some favorites. Bride started stripping on the table while the groom was outside. Bride and best man had sex in a closet. Bride lost her ring less than 3 hours after being married. Mother of the groom lit the table on fire because she didn't like the bride or her family. Groom was passed out drunk less than 30 minutes into the reception. He pre-gamed in the limo. A bartender refused to serve him when he arrived. Groomsmen loaded him back into the limo to sleep it off, and he didn't come back that night. I'm a musician and the son of a wedding photographer. I've actually played in a band whose leader, on the wedding day, took a deposit for the divorce party that was to follow. The groom's mother laid it down and said, I give it 6 months. 9 months later. There we were. And there she, the bride, wasn't. I worked weddings as a server for about a year and saw a ton of different things, but one stands out specifically. This venue was on a golf course, and in the middle of the reception all of the groomsmen and the groom got drunk and decided it was a good idea to go swimming in one of the ponds in their tuxes. The bride was standing on the back porch screaming at them, asking him how he could be such a dumbass and lamenting loud enough for the world to hear that she married him. I didn't see the bride for the rest of the reception after that. Pretty sure that marriage ended pretty quickly. Yes, I'm a wedding photographer and think this often. Used to do weddinging. Went to a storage room to grab some gear and walked in on the bride going down on the best man. I immediately closed the door. Then thought, wait, did that just happen? And opened again to see the best man look like deer in headlights. I slammed the door and went back to my post for the night. My co-worker said, don't say a lying word. We don't get paid to get involved. Just collect the check and keep playing music. I've been the DJ at a few hundred weddings. There was drama at most of them in some way. One in particular broke out into an old school saloon style fight like in the old western movies. I'm pretty sure that one didn't last. Anybody get thrown through a window? Not me. But my little brother did catering for a bit after he graduated college. He told me a few stories. Groom drank 10 beers during dinner. Proceeded to projectile vomit on the wedding cake. Bride's mother overheard groom talking about his high school wrestling career. I don't work in the wedding industry. But last fall a friend of my husband's got married. It was a private ceremony due to COVID. But they posted a video of it on Facebook afterwards. In the video, the bride does her walk up to the altar. It was outdoors. Holds up her finger as if to say just a second. And pulls out her cell phone. There's like a solid minute of her texting someone while her poor groom just awkwardly stands there before she finally allows the ceremony to proceed. Super cringy. I bake wedding cakes and cookies, but this happened before I was in the business. A week before the wedding, bride was talking all about how excited she was to get married because that meant she could finally do cocaine. What? Asterisk. Groom was confused and asked for more info. Bride was like, well, they say when you do drugs, you should do them with someone you trust. She planned on them doing it on their honeymoon. When he straight up said no, she threatened to call off the wedding. He said fine. Call it off. Wedding still happened. She gave in. But 3 months later, She took their 7-month-old daughter to a drug party at her sister's while groom was working. He found out about it. Showed up at the house. Everyone was passed out. And his daughter was screaming, crying on the bedroom floor. He took her. And left without a word to anyone. Packed his bags and never contacted bride again. I've told this story before, but I was working as a cook at a golf course, and at one of the weddings we catered, the bride got incredibly drunk and kept sitting in the laps of all the male guests and flirting with them pretty heavily. I think she made out with one of them too. Ike. Her new husband just sat at the head table by himself, looking more and more like a guy who made a $30,000 mistake. A guy photographed this awful couple. She was a sour cow. Barely cracked a smile, and all day she was following him round saying, "Mark, get my shoes. Mark, where's my bag? Mark." He looked completely miserable and barely spoke all day. At one point we asked them to kiss for a photo and she said, "Oh, we're not that kind of couple." I was a wedding planner for almost a decade and saw these types of couples regularly. My biggest key indicator for this was whether they cared more about the wedding day than actually being married to one another. For example, I remember one couple who really wanted an over-the-top wedding that would be good enough to be featured in a popular luxury wedding magazine. They spared no expense. They became so obsessed with this that they were even choosing members of their bridal party based on their looks rather than their relationship with them. The bride had 2 brothers. One brother looked like a model for Hugo Boss and her other brother looked a bit like Fat Thor. Well, only the hot brother was selected to be a groomsman. Things like this caused a lot of tension between family members and fights between the couple. It was awkward a lot of the time. I knew for sure this couple wouldn't make it for long. Interestingly enough, the couple divorced a week before their wedding was featured in that luxury bridal magazine. Probably too late, but after 7 years in the industry to stand out. Groom focused on the boys all night. Rarely saw the bride and groom together. In his speech he mentioned the bridesmaids and groomsmen, but proceeded to spend the rest of his speech talking about his new place of hierarchy in the family. Never mentioned her. 3 months later it was over. Second and most favorite. TLDR. Bride drives herself to the ceremony. Pops the ute and sculls a drink in front of the guests. Is drunk before the reception begins. Shows the MC she's not wearing anything but her garter under the dress. Pulls her strapless dress down to show me her nipple. Groom spends whole night outside chain smoking. And that's the short version. What's the deal with many answers talking about the bride eyeing the best man? Why would the bride suddenly find the groom's brother best friend irresistible on the wedding day? And what kind of sick people their friend's fiance registered sign on the wedding day? Why do people put pennies up their ass? Power moves are hard to explain sometimes and often uncomfortable. But you probably have ass pennies on you right now. After reading all of these, I think people that work in the wedding industry should be hired as matchmakers. They clearly know what to look for. Well, usually cancelling the wedding twice the week before the actual wedding is a good sign. They made it 2 weeks before divorce. Not necessarily a divorce between the happy couple, but while working weddings one summer I saw the best man and maid of honor walk out of the same bathroom like 10 seconds apart. Did they at least close the goddamn door though? I worked in a rough as hell hotel bar in Rotherham, UK, and loved working the weddings. 2 stand out which will definitely end in divorce. 1. The groom was obviously from a more well-off, snobby family and his wife's family was a bit rough around the edges. He seemed like an alright bloke. None of his family turned up to the wedding. Literally none. His speech was a bit sad, thanking the people that bothered to turn up, etc. 2. Buckle up for this. A couple who both had adult kids from different partners getting married. I served the groom's son. Then the bride's daughter, who began arguing at the bar. The bride's daughter offered the groom's son a fight outside, to which he accepted and leathered her. So she called her male mates to come around and beat him up. They were met by the bride, who was furious her daughter had called up lads to crash the wedding, so she grabbed a bottle and glassed a guy. Amazing. 10/10. My friend's family owns a small hotel that's popular as a destination wedding location. They have a giant suite for the bride and groom that's included with cost of THR wedding. At about 11:00 the night before the wedding, after the rehearsal, a call is made for room service. Enough food for 20 people. When it gets brought up, the door is answered by a naked woman, not the bride, and the staff delivering are asked to bring it in. When they go in, there's a huge orgy going on. The bride and groom are the centerpieces. Her with 3 guys and him with 3 girls. And dozens of others having sex all throughout the room. Each delivery person is given $50 and told not to tell the family about it as they wouldn't understand and it would just freak them out. Once back downstairs, the staff are talking about how the marriage will never last. 2 years later, the bride and groom are there for the wedding of their friends, where it all happens again. Turns out they are all swingers and a pre-wedding orgy has become a tradition between their swinger friends.